Good morning. Welcome to our alternatively scheduled Consultants Corner. This session, for timeliness reasons, we are doing a few days earlier than our regular first and third Tuesday of the month. We wanted to get ahead of it. The recently announced federal nonprofit security grant program, the deadline being just a few days after the current New York hate crimes grant deadline, and we wanted to make sure that we gave you all the information we have. Obviously, we have one of the gurus, David Pollock, the chair of CSI, to give you all the best insider knowledge. The information will also be posted. All of our regulars know these webinars are recorded. To get through the information, because there is a lot, we'll go through the material and, of course, have a Q&A at the end. So put your questions in the chat. If it's not answered during the actual presentation, we'll address it at the end through Q&A. And also make sure that you are familiar with all the materials. Our website, CSI-NY.org, has all this information as well as a link to the PowerPoint we're about to sit through, as well as you should read through the RFA from the HSES, the agency that administers the federal grant. You really should be familiar with it, take advantage of all the information that's out there, but nonetheless, we'll try to short circuit as much as we can, as well as fill in some of the gray areas from being at the forefront of this for the last almost 20 years this grant has existed. And with that, I will turn it over to David. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dov. This is a non-hostile takeover, and we hope that everyone is sufficiently confused and feeling under pressure because there are only a few days to go. And if you really want to add to your anxiety, just go to our dedicated website, CSINY.org/security-grants, and you not only have all of the information we're going to give you today, the slide deck is already uploaded, but it also gives you a countdown clock, which will tell you how many days, hours, and seconds you have to submit each grant. If your anxiety level isn't, maxed out yet, we can help. Basically, this is the best we can do. You should know that we kind of read it, but you're responsible to read all of the directions yourself. Do the best you can too. Dov noted that we're almost at the 2-decade mark. And probably for most of those 2 decades, I've been saying, don't lose points or get worse. Rule number 1 is to learn how to read and follow directions. Rule number 2 is there is no rule number 2. Just see rule number 1. Too many people think that they know more than the judges, know more than the people who wrote the grant requirements, and they come up with their own rules. I'm going to try to tell you how the people who will score the grant view the questions and try to point you in the right direction. This is, getting ready for your grant. These are the kinds of organizations that are eligible and which are not. If you have any specific questions, just send them in to our question line, CSI_questions@CSINY.org. If you say, this is what I am, are we eligible? Basically, you must be a 501c3, not just nonprofit, but 501c3. The federal grant is different than the state grant. You can get up to 3 or maybe 6, depending on special cases, grants per organization. You can get 3 grants so long as they're separate addresses. 6 grants are, for example, many schools have a campground upstate. There's a NSGP urban areas, which in New York are New York City, Long Island, and Westchester. Everything else is a USPS, the state grant. One thing that you really should keep in mind is that this year, there's less money available. Congress cut this program by 10%. Although there may be some fixes in the near future, we don't know exactly how the government's going to handle that. So I figure that of the people who have submitted full applications, maybe a third, maybe a little less of the people in New York State will get grants. Applicants will get grants. The percentage will be higher in New York, Long Island, and Westchester than it is upstate, but it'll average around a third. These are the rules. I'm not going to read everything or we'll be here forever. This slide deck is already up on the website. Now, to add confusion, you're going to need two separate accounts to make this happen. One is called SFS, which is how you pre-qualify. We've been telling people to pre-qualify for months now. I am not sure if you're starting to pre-qualify today, if you will be pre-qualified by May 21st or May 17th, which are the two deadlines. You're going to have to pre-qualify. I'm not going to go into the details here. And then you have to get an eGrants account to submit the grant. Don't wait. You're already behind the gun. For pre-qualification, here's how to register for pre-qualification. That takes for 5 to 7 days, which is why I'm not sure if if it's too late to even start now. I just wanted to remind people that these are reimbursement grants, which means that you have to lay out the money for organizations in New York City, Westchester, and Long Island. UJA has funded a loan program, bridge loans, so that they will loan you the money so you don't have to lay it out and then pay back Hebrew Free Loan. You're going to need a vulnerability assessment or vulnerability assessments for each one of your sites. Again, here's where you can get vulnerability assessments, and it's already late. I think that people are, if you're going to do a vulnerability assessment, you're probably going to be stuck with doing a self-assessment because all of the good sources that we know are already fully booked and can't deliver in time to do a grant. We have a bunch of self-assessment tools here, all of which are acceptable, and it's another step you're going to have to do in the next few days. These are the allowable examples: access control, bollards, barriers, fences, blast-resistant doors and windows, contract security, CCTV, and M&A. We'll go into the details in a little bit. Unallowable examples: license plate readers, weapons or weapons training, facial recognition software, general expenses, Knox boxes, or proof of concept initiatives. This is a slide for Dove. Remember that CSI, for those of you in New York, CSI does a lot of support post-grant. A lot of people think, and they may be right, that it's harder to navigate the post-grant environment than it is to navigate to getting a grant itself. So, what you have to do is, make sure that you're not asking for more than you can handle. Don't bite off more than you can chew. There's going to be lots of steps, so focus on what you need. I know many of you out there, I looked at the list, have assessments from CSI. Those assessments are not saying, you need to do all of this tomorrow, if not today. Our assessments are a plan that you can do over 3 to 5 years, and each step can help you become more and more secure. So we can help you. Reach out to your regional security director. Bill Hayes, our Westchester Bronx person, is on the line. The reason that we're looking at his picture and not him live is that he's, fielding phone calls as we speak because people are asking lots of questions. That's good news. We have an incredible team of regional security directors and Jamie Matos, who's out there answering questions every day. Get your questions to us. We'll get you the best answer we can. Now, the application is called an investment justification. Remember, this is the federal government. They can't make it easy. They can't just say grant application. It's an investment justification. Just live with it. Again, each investment justification must be only one site, one physical address, one address per investment justification. So you're going to submit them all to one eGrants account, but you're going to have to do an IJ with and an assessment for every site that you use. If you have 3 sites, that means 3 sets of documents. The organization must occupy the location at the time of application. We get tons of questions. Well, it's under construction. We're moving next year. Can't we go and just build it in? Oh, that would be logical. But what happened in the early years of the grants is that organizations didn't really finish their buildings on time, even though they had grants. They never spent the money because the organizations never finished their new building. And therefore, people who are really finishing their building and really very close are not allowed to apply for future sites in process. You have to occupy the location at the time of application. You have to do a summary of your mission statement and attach your mission statement, and everything is reviewed by DHSES designees. This year, it's a little bit different, the scoring process. The federal government isn't going to do their own scoring. The DHSES, either their staff or local police who they work with, will do the scoring of your application, and everything will be reviewed, but Washington will only deal with the bonus points that we'll talk about at the end. Now, on the investment justification, I tried to give you, what happens. They ask, are you renting or leasing? Doesn't matter which one. This is a pull-down box. But they do ask, do you have the owner's permission? Because what we've seen is people want to install or change the doors, and the owner said, no, I like the doors just the way they are. So if you're leasing, you have to have the owner's permission, and you must currently occupy the premises, as I said. Now, here's some more questions. You have to be 501c3. Does the organization have a UEI? I'm not going to spend a lot of time because you don't need to have a valid UEI at the time of application. But if you are a grantee, you must get a UEI before they'll give you any money. So you really have incentive to do it then. Are you currently located in an designated urban area? Yes. And then here's a pull down list, and you're going to find New York City here. Don't get too upset if you're in Long Island or Westchester. You're in the New York City urban area. And then the total funding requested is going to be automatically filled in for you. Your mission statement, most organizations now put their mission statement on their website. If you do not have a mission statement, here's some examples, and you can kind of write your own. Now, the mission statement is important because the way these applications are scored, I see Stuart Verstandig staring at me right now. Stuart should know he's in a synagogue, so his score is going to be tripled because he's at risk because he's an ideology-based spiritual or religious entities. So, medical and educational institutions are double scored. Make sure if you're a yeshiva, make sure it's absolutely clear in your mission statement that your education is for religious purposes to further your religious goals. It's the same thing, Jamie, for your children's school. You have to make sure that it's that the mission statement is, to provide religious education, and then everyone else gets a single word score. And people come to us. We're a terrific human services organization. How come we're at a disadvantage? This is what Congress decided. Okay. And so how does it work? You want to condense your mission statement, and then you have to choose a primary organization type. If you are ideology-based, spiritual, or religious, choose that, because that's where you're going to get more of the score. Then you have your organization's primary affiliation. Most of us here will say Jewish, but it has a long list of religions plus other or none. Okay, so just to go step by step, organizations in New York City, Long Island, Westchester are in the New York urban area. Those of us with CSI who are in Rockland and Greater Hudson Valley are in the state. Okay. Now, then they talk about symbolic value. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. What's a symbolic value? You have symbolic value to your members, your community, your student and parent community, whatever you are. Is your building landmark? Do you have distinctive architecture? Are you on a major street? Is there a cluster of houses of worship by you? Do you have a significant social media presence? If you're just a plain corner school and you have no distinctive features, you should still not leave this blank. If you leave it blank, you're going to get 0 points because these 3 questions are a total of 5 points. It asks you to, have you done anything in the past? We'll get to that in a second. And, for example, what you did during Superstorm Sandy for your community or your neighborhood during COVID. Did you work with your local police or emergency management agency? Did you attend a CSI webinar? Are you on a CSI alert list or your local government alert list? Again, don't leave this blank. These are deeper dive on symbolic value. I won't go into that too deeply right now, but it just will help you when you're writing. Now, the meat of the application is the risk section. It's 15 out of the 40 points. And it's based, there's a formula that risk is equal to threat plus vulnerability plus consequences. We ironically have 3 sections, each worth 5 points: threat, vulnerability, and consequences. Basically, They're asking, describe the identification and substantiation of specific threats or attacks against the nonprofit or a closely related organization, network, or cell. The first question is, what happened to you? So I saw someone sign on, and this person came up to, I was walking back from synagogue on December 24th, and I hear my name being called, and this person was on her bicycle, and she was calling to me saying, we just had a bomb threat. Well, that happened to her and her synagogue, and she's going to be writing a grant. Those kind of things you should know and keep track of any vandalism, threats, graffiti, whatever, either onto your building or your website, your social media. And what happened locally and worldwide. Then we go into vulnerabilities. Now, let's go into what kind of threats we have to be thinking of. The highlighted threats, this is from the Comprehensive Preparedness Guide of FEMA. And, essentially active shooter, armed assault, cyber attack, explosives. I added vandalism, arson, or vehicle ramming. So these are the kinds of things that are covered in the CSI assessments that we give to organizations. And these are the kinds of things that they're going to want to see. Do you know how to mitigate? There are certain magic words in this process. Why are you putting up a fence? And, Dove will debate how effective this is, but are you delaying or diverting someone from attacking your facility if you have a fence? Are you doing screening, search, or detection? Those are access control, physical protective measures, on-scene security, cybersecurity. All of these are things that mitigate your vulnerabilities. And that's the story you want to tell in your investment justification. The story is, these are our problems. This is how a bad guy or girl can get to us. And this is what we're doing to stop it, to protect our facility and protect our people. And then, there's eventually consequences, and the consequences, we're doing this to make sure these bad things don't happen. So, sample vulnerability. Language. This is something that is fairly new that I'm highlighting. It is strongly recommended that your vulnerability assessment include thorough and comprehensive identification of all security vulnerabilities and should not be limited only to the projects being requested. So people come to us all the time, and Bill gets this question, oh, we want cameras. So just write up that we need cameras. Well, a CSI assessment is by its nature comprehensive, and we try to tell you everything that could be needed, even though no one has the money to do everything today. But the judges are going to be looking for, are you choosing the most important steps to protect your people? Here are some examples of language you can use, to describe vulnerabilities. Again, Dove has been responsible for developing language that we put out in our assessment describing vulnerabilities. All of those are really spot on. And so if you have assessment from CSI, it's a cut and paste job. If you don't, here's some good examples that give you what you need. Again, consequences. These are the bad things that can happen. There are 4 kinds of consequences according to FEMA and DHS FEMA. And FEMA administers the grant. So they set the rules. So human, economic, mission, consequences to your mission, and psychological consequences. And those are things you have to list all 4 categories to get the full 5 points. And then what we do is we go on to the next section, which is facility hardening. In other words, how do we prevent bad things from happening? They want to know the allowable costs. We include facility hardening activities, planning and exercise related costs, contracted security, all of the things that you could do. So, for this section, it says each activity and investment include the quantity, as estimated price per unit and proposed usage. So, here for fencing, 240 feet of 8-foot chain length fencing. Notice, Bill, we say 8 foot with 1 foot of barbed wire to address vulnerability of breaching. So we're talking about, in your vulnerabilities, you can say someone can enter our premises because there's no fence. And you have a estimated cost per foot and a total number. Everyone asks me, do I have to get bids? Do these have to be exact numbers? No. As a matter of fact, if you're getting bids, it could be that a vendor would think that they're going to get business from you. And that's a no-no. You can't come up with any pre-arrangement. Remember, down the road, you get a grant, you're going to have to play by the New York State rules. And for example, the person who does your assessment can't end up as your vendor. What you do here is you can reach out to your regional security director and they can give you our rules of thumb. Dov, do you remember what was it per foot of fence that you had come up with? Wasn't it like 20?
It really depends on the type of fence. I'm hesitant to give cost over the webinar.
Okay. Dove can get you that kind of thing. For interior cameras, we estimate $2,500 per camera. Exterior cameras are a little bit more. That includes installation. And that, we can give you the kind of numbers that are reasonable. Remember that you're going to have to get bids. And if it costs more money, it's not as if New York State is going to increase your grant. These are the numbers that you're limited to. So if these cameras don't cost $20,000, they're going to cost $25,000, then you're going to have to come up with the balance yourself. What you can do is to say, well, it's $25,000, we don't have the money, so we're only going to put in 7 cameras, not 8. You can do that down the road and explain why. Dov and I have common mantras, which are always reach out to your program representative, the person at DHSES or DCJS who is managing your program, and you have a grant. The operative term is mother may I or father may I. You have to go to your program rep, you show them what you're going to do, and then you say, does this look okay to you? They say yes, then do it. There are people who do things down the road, think they can cut corners or do things another way, and they are then told, oh, you installed all those cameras in a manner not allowable in New York State, so we're not going to take away that $20,000, But we're not paying for those cameras. You can spend the money somewhere else for something else that is in your vulnerability assessment. This is something that you kind of make sure that you know it's there. Everything has drop downs this year. The authorized equipment list has expanded, but there are very few new items. And you just look at the pull down list. Okay. We've dealt with the risk. We've dealt with the program that you have to do. These are extra, the kind of more mundane administrative things. What they want you to do is to show in milestones that you know that this is a major project. You're going to be spending $150,000. And you know that things have to come in order. Now, the federal government is very explicit, and it's pre-printed that you need environmental planning and historical preservation review. And then a start date. I'm tipping you off. A start date of 10/1 is kind of practical because you're going to learn that you have the grant in September probably. And at some point, they're going to tell you the first thing you're going to have to do is EHP, which is Environmental Planning and Historical Preservation Review. They're going to send you the forms, and that's the first hoop to jump through. Don't anticipate that being done until the end of February. If you are somehow very, very efficient, you jump on this right away and you spend the 3 hours, Dov, you think, doing EHP, 2-3 hours doing the form, and you do it right, and there aren't any, longer questions to get to. You might get it earlier.
Right.
They're not going to grade you on getting this done as quickly as possible or misinterpreting the time unless you are unreasonable. Dov, did you unmute for a reason?
Yeah, I just want to interject real quick. Uh, David mentioned earlier that sometimes the procurement side of this, right, implementing your grant award can be more cumbersome, more difficult than the actual application. So here's one, David asked, how long will the EHP take? It could take a couple hours, but if you've decided to break up your 150 grand into 10 different projects, you're gonna have a lot more pictures to take, a lot more details to share. But if you're doing a couple door projects, obviously it'll limit your EHP and also its review. So everything has its yin and yang. And while I'm on that subject, when you apply, we really advise keeping it to 3 plus or minus categories to ensure you're putting the appropriate amount of funding towards that hardware. If you kind of shortchange it, that really limits you and handcuffs you on doing a full project.
Again, if you have any problems, reach out to us. One of our security directors was doing the project, managing the project for his synagogue, and he couldn't get EHP done. And he reached out to me. He had submitted several times and gotten more questions and more questions. It's not a life or death issue here. Submitting your IJ, either you're accepted or wait till next year. Submitting your EHP, you can submit it until they accept it. You come to us. I have different experiences beyond security, so I know what government bureaucrats want. And I answered the question for, that person. And 2 hours later, he had approval of his EHP because he answered the question the way they wanted it. So we're here to help. All of us, we have a phenomenal team. Just come to us. Now, complete all requirements of EI. Remember, I told you you needed your unique entity identifier. So if you didn't have it, you should put in your milestones, you're going to get it. They may be looking, you know you have to get it. And sign your contracts. Remember, we said you cannot get any money or charge for items that are done before you have a signed contract with DHSES. So they're looking for things like this. And again, it starts, I'm just saying, this is a guess, somewhere around September 15th. You'll be notified that you're a grantee. And it's generally sometime in September that they send out the notifications. Then I gave 6 months of completion to do all this. If it doesn't take 6 months and you're going faster, great. But then I have, we didn't start developing bid specs and soliciting bids until, February. Now, notice that February is before March 15th. They're not going to allow you to solicit a bid before you have a contract. So don't do that. But you can develop bid specifications. You can start thinking about what you want, and that's no problem. So that once you have the grant, the contract signed, you can go ahead and just send them out. Solicit and evaluate bids. Well, I'm saying we're not soliciting bids until June. So they're looking at the order. There's other kinds of orders you want to think about. If you have a project that entails both doors and access control, and access control clearly starts with a lock on the door, well, you can't put a lock on the door until you have a door. That's what milestones are. They're looking to find out if you know that this is a major project.
If I may,
Yeah.
if you see on the top right of the page that we're looking at, 5 possible points out of 40, right? That's the scoring mechanism that you're aiming for. At this stage in the game, right? The grant's been around a lot. Many organizations are scoring very closely to that top number of 40. And we've seen that this section, unfortunately, a lot of organizations skimp over, or they make some sort of small error, put the wrong year in, or don't sit, include some of the items David's mentioning. It really is critical. I wouldn't skip over obviously any section in your IJ, in your investment justification, but this is one where we notoriously see not comprehensive, not filled out, and DHSES, taking off points for it. So I would maximize this. I'd use every line. I'd keep an eye on the actual dates you put in, right? You can't start before the grant is awarded, which won't be till September, October of the year. So make sure that that's both in line and you say as much as you can in terms of managing this project.
All right. Thank you, Dove. And Dove is absolutely right. You're starting with a 40-point goal. We've seen many, many good IJs that lose 2-3 points here. And remember I said we're seeing a record of 30% of the applicants are going to get grants, which means that you need a 36 or a 37 or you're out of the running. This year it might be 37 or 38. So you have to be careful. Project management. Who's going to manage the project? Name, phone number, email address, and experience. And, this is pretty straightforward. And, you might say, someone may be, who's submitting this and it will do the project management may be the principal of a school. But so talk about their experience with other major projects. And you can say, look at members of our board are in the real estate industry, they're accountants, they're lawyers, so they're going to help us with this organization, with this implementation. And they want challenges to effective implementation of the project. In other words, if you're a school, you don't want people coming into classrooms to put blast mitigation film on the windows while the kids are sitting there. You'd rather do this on vacations. Again, if you're a school in the milestones, and if you have blast mitigation film, the blast mitigation films are going to be installed in July and August, not in October. Talk about any challenges. Cash flow is a challenge. The steps, you realize that there are lots of steps to do this. That's another challenge. You can say, we're going to work with our local police. We're going to be talking to our CSI regional security director and CSI for help. New York knows who CSI is. They're happy that we're, part of the team. Impact. I'm pausing because I always enter this section with trepidation. Because let me be honest, several months ago, I reached out to someone at FEMA and said, how are we going to answer impact? What's the best answer? Can you get me, don't give me the perfect answer, but tell me where in the FEMA library do I find how to do measurable outcomes and outputs and outcomes. Well, this is a very a responsive person. Bill knows him well too, and he never got back to me. I mentioned to the director of grants in New York State that I had reached out to this person to get a better answer on outputs and outcomes. And the director of grants for New York State's answer to me was, good luck, because he hasn't been able to get any good answers. So this is what we know from the documentation. That number one, measurable means use numbers. 100% of the funding is centered on improving and increasing a nonprofit's organization. In other words, congregation ABC's physical or cybersecurity and facility target hardening and to enhance the protection of soft targets and crowded places. Those are magic words there. Remember, I keep talking about magic words. They want protection of soft targets, crowded places, because that's their stated goal for the NSGP. That's how the spending of these millions of dollars fits in the national homeland protection rubric by addressing vulnerabilities identified in our vulnerability assessment. Just play with that. And then you want measurable outputs and outcomes, and that directly linked to the vulnerabilities and consequences outlined in the risk section. Okay, you certainly want the percentage for each of the following categories. In other words, if you're spending $75,000 on contracted security, then you want to say that 50% of our grant will go for contracted security. And these are categories that are defined in the the federal and the state proposals. And just tell them what the percentages are for each one of these. I had previously advised something more detailed, but I don't see the requirement for that in either of the documents. If you say that contracted security will enhance, and remember I had another list of magic words, enhance access control for the facility so that 100% of the visitors are screened, that would be good. There's nothing wrong with it if you have enough room. But this is what I think is required. But I don't have a lot of confidence in knowing the answer to this one. Okay, application checklists. These are all very much, there's a good list. I have another one with check marks. They're basically the same. I took them from two different New York State documents, so they're not exactly the same, so I only put one here. Essentially, unless you send all of this in, your organization will not, and your application will not be reviewed. If you send everything in, at least you'll get to the next level and they'll start evaluating and judging your investment justification. Bonuses. FEMA is going to add the bonus. First of all, anyone who has not received a grant, never received a grant, will get 15 bonus points. People ask, well, it's not fair. The last time I got this was in 2011. Well, you got money in 2011, so you don't get the bonus points. I mentioned the mission-based bonus, which is the biggest bonus. So if you did get a 37, that 37 is triple to 111 if my math is right. If you're a house of worship, you're ahead of the game. And then there is a 10-point bonus for underserved communities. This can be a lot, it make a big difference. Much of New York City is underserved, including Jewish neighborhoods, is considered underserved. If you're in a wealthy suburb, you're not going to get the 10 points. You can see if you're going to get that 10 points by clicking on this link, and you put in your address and it'll say underserved or not underserved. If you're worried about that kind of thing, maybe a state grant will be preferable. Then it asks for the funding history. Have you received a grant in the past? Yes or no. And then they ask when you did it. It goes back to the beginning of the grant period. So let's say that, after all the bonuses, you get 120 points. The state is asked before the bonus to take everyone with a 37 and put them in priority order. They're going to arbitrarily decide that this organization should come before that organization. They're going to use a number of different methods. Sometimes the bigger organizations are more important. Not more important. They will protect more people giving a grant to a larger organization. I also think that people who haven't had grants for 10 years would go to the head of the queue of those people with 37. Can I guarantee it? No, but make sure you give that information. Okay, Dove doesn't know either, right? I'm just guessing. It's experience guessing. For more information, here's how to reach us. Remember, everything here is on this website. If you have specific questions, here's how to submit it. You know, we've already submitted some, Dove and I, to the state. And they will publish a Q&A on a rolling basis.
No, thank you, David. Let's do it. There's fortunately not too many questions, but we always like to make sure we get into what's remaining. We answered a few as we went through. A few comments before we jump into the questions. First of all, we will not be having a consultant's corner next Tuesday. Usually the first Tuesday of the month we have. We're not going to have it. This webinar took place of that consultant's corner webinar. To sum up some high-level pieces, right? The three main things you need to ensure to be eligible, or the pieces that how you apply, is your pre-qualification, which we've talked about in previous webinars in more depth, right? That's through the SFS system. You need to be pre-qualified for both the hate crimes grant that we've talked about in previous webinars, as well as the federal NSGP that we're talking about today. You have the second piece being you have to have an eGrants account. Most of you probably have applied before and have eGrants accounts. The eGrants account is to apply for this, the NSGP, through the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. The hate crimes grant, which we've talked about in previous webinars and did not get involved with today, with a deadline of May 17th, is a different application system. That's called the GMS, Grants Management System. Very similar, but you need, if you're applying for both grants, you need to have accounts with both systems. And then finally, the third major piece, and of course, follow the checklist. Those are the nuances of what goes into your applications. The third major piece is your assessment. Before we dive into the Q&A, I want to give one major trick to everybody here, a very legitimate and kosher trick. When you complete your IJ, you can score it yourself, and we advise you to do this. We at CSI, David, Jamie, your regional security directors, we get asked a lot of times to score or review an IJ. End of the day, we don't know any better than someone else, and we don't have the capacity, unfortunately, while we help everyone get through the application. But what you can do is at the end of the request for applications, we provided a link at the beginning of this chat. On our website, if you got the email from DHSES or you go to the DHSES website, you can pull the RFA. And at the end of the RFA, starting at page, looking at it right now on another screen, on page 35, NSGP scoring matrix, it literally tells you how many points will be scored per the answer. What I would advise you to do is have someone else who is not involved in this grant application, who has never heard the terms IJ and doesn't know security, to just take this scoring matrix, take your completed IJ, and do a review for you. And they might be able to identify where some gaps are. I think that is one of the best moves you can make before you finally submit your IJ. Just have it scored internally by someone who is not. If you score it yourself, you're going to give yourself great marks. Give it to somebody else to take a look, so that you can, get an outsider's perspective. Again, not security minded, not involved in the process, new to it. With that, let's turn to some questions. David's showing the website. I saw there were some comments about some of the links. We'll recheck, and we're going to address the questions that we did not address yet in the Q&A itself. Here's a good question. David, got two. It's also in the RFA, David. I know you're showing this Excel. It's also in the actual RFA. So, David, we got two questions kind of related to listing your ideology versus education. Is a yeshiva by definition ideology-based or education-based? Or a similar question, should a JCC choose ideology-based or other, right? You and I have been around this a lot, and how is the best way that you advise people to proceed?
Okay. So you're always at an advantage if your ideology religious based over being educational based, and certainly being a summer camp. The question is, how do you honestly answer this question? Most yeshivas, if they were done by a competent attorney, were incorporated under the Religious Corporation Act law of New York State, excuse me. Not the non-for-profit, not the educational law. So therefore, I always advise people, if it's accurate, to say, if you're a synagogue, if you're a camp, if you're a yeshiva, to say we were incorporated under the Religious Corporations Law. No one can debate that. Essentially, I don't care. I've seen with a Hasidic yeshiva, their mission is to teach Torah in the tradition of the ex-Hasidim. That's fine. Or a Catholic school to teach the values of the Franciscan tradition. All of that stuff is absolutely perfect and supports your mission. Summer camp, look at how you were incorporated. Look at the mission statement on the website. Many Jewish summer camps, for example, offer religious classes. And the mission of the camp is to further the religion. So if you have support anywhere to do that, say you're ideology based.
Be straightforward. Don't try to twist it. Next question. Can you apply for purely security personnel coverage for this NSGP grant?
That's an easy one. Yes for NSGP, no for hate crimes.
And how much of the NSGP award can go towards security personnel?
I'm sighing because they've made this in New York over the past several years. New York DHSES considers 100% an appropriate number. There must be a waiver applied for if you're asking for more than 50%. New York State automatically applies the waiver. So, I've spoken to some of my colleagues in New Jersey, and they were very excited because a waiver was kind of encouraged this year as opposed to last year. And I said, well, New York has always encouraged contract security. Again, remember, they're going to look at your vulnerability assessment. And your vulnerability assessment says your door is made of cardboard and, could blow in at any point. And you're having a security guard there. The judges are going to say, hey, are you really prioritizing? You just want to have guards there for show? Because guards can only be part of a comprehensive security package.
I'll add one more comment regarding requesting guards under the NSGP. You cannot use this funding request to pay for guards that are currently scheduled, currently staffed. They call that supplanting, to use dishes and FEMA terminology. It can only be for additional guards and additional shift of what you currently have.
By the way, our assessment, basically says that access control is insufficient. For example, we describe it as a vulnerability. It must be a vulnerability. And then you have to mitigate the vulnerability through the use of the guards.
All right. A couple technical questions we didn't get into today regarding some pre-qualification stuff. Please, for all of you who want a little bit more information on pre-qualification within SFS, check out our earlier webinars. But just to quickly address the question here, can you explain registering with the New York State Attorneys General Charities Bureau?
It is required. It's part of the SFS system. If you are a religious corporation, it's pretty simple because you are exempt but you have to be determined to be exempt. You open up, you click, and we have all of the links on our websites. You go to the Attorney General's website. You fill in the name of your organization and your address, your contact information. And then you get a list of questions, one of which is, was the organization incorporated for religious purposes or something to that effect? You say yes. And then a box shows up that says register for exempt organizations. You follow that. You don't have to submit a whole lot of other stuff. And you go ahead. Now, I am not sure that the Attorney General has been slow at applying for evaluating and giving out the exemptions. What I advise people to do is to go into the AG website, get to the point where you've submitted everything, take a screenshot documenting you asked for the exemption, and in SFS, where it requires AG registration, just upload a PDF copy of the screenshot that you took. And the other trick with SFS that I am telling people is make sure if you're just starting SFS that you check off that you want this reviewed by DHSES, not DCJS, even if you're applying for a state grant. Do DHSES. They have a lot more experience and they process things quicker. And the same thing, you use charities. If you haven't done it yet, just take a screenshot and submit it. Because what's the worst that can happen? If they don't accept it, it's too late. If anyone is waiting for the AG to come up with a positive determination because they started on May 2nd, it might not happen. So take the screenshot, submit it, and whatever happens, happens. I don't guarantee it'll work.
Right.
But at least, I have a feeling that it has worked in the past at DHSES.
For pre-qualification questions, I've put in the chat the link to David's pre-qualification page. We update this constantly as we learn new things, as we hear new issues. The questions that David, Jamie, myself get from the community are 99% of the time answered there. So as you navigate, I would put that link in your arsenal to get the answers to pre-qualification, links, where to go, how to find it. It's designed so you don't have to keep asking. You really have it in your hands. All right, next question. We'll try to wrap up shortly. We have to look at our website. We'll show everyone. Maybe, David, you can pull up the website and just show them how to find this webinar. Real quick, a couple people asked. All right, so it says that the slideshow said that only one TVA, one assessment per application. We're not quoting David. David's quoting the RFA. The RFA states only one TVA per attachment. If you want to show some updates, I would use a PDF to combine the additional documents to make it one document. That's the best I can say if you're just updating with additional paperwork, because that's a clear rule. It says it's a new rule for this year that we made sure to share with the team. If anyone catches references to Grants Gateway, that's old. Grants Gateway is history. It's now SFS. The state loved to throw a curveball at us. Grants Gateway was the old way to do pre-qualification, and then they rebuilt the world while we're all applying. So if you see Grants Gateway, you're definitely educated and you know to ignore that. There's a lot of pieces going on.
It now says the right link. Our pre-qualification page is right here, with lots and lots and lots of help. Too much, but it gets complicated. And, I mentioned it may be too late to successfully navigate SFS if you're just starting now. I can't tell you. And if you want this presentation, it's right here. You
Go ahead,
only
David,
have
show us.
15 days for the state and 19 days for the federal.
Right, so there's the link on the right of the page to what the presentation we just went through. We'll just make sure it's working correctly.
Right here.
All right, there are a few other direct questions and a few very specific items. If you feel like we didn't get to it, please always feel free to reach out to us, CSI_questions at CSINY.org, or to your regional security director. We always go a little over. We want to make sure to answer most of these questions. But if we didn't, or we have more, please feel free. But as mentioned, whether it's a link, whether it's the guidance, whether it's the answers, it's on our website. Maybe a few glitches here and there. It's change. We're learning stuff daily and trying to stay ahead of it for you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, David, and everyone. Best of luck with both these grants. Definitely take advantage, and we're here to best support while we're knocking out hundreds of assessments for organizations in the New York area. So thank you, David. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dove. And thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. Always, everyone. Always thank you, Jamie. All right. Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.